Thanks for pressing play on another edition of Another Dolphins Podcast. Mock draft season has officially arrived, and I have Josh joining me to discuss positions we would love and absolutely hate to see the Miami Dolphins draft in the first round. But Josh, before we get to that, before we get all riled up, the coaching carousel, it's starting to slow down a little bit. Mike Vrabel is taking over as head coach of the New England Patriots. Lucky us. And you have Aaron Glenn, former Detroit Lions defensive coordinator, taking over as head coach of the New York Jets. Josh, how do we feel about Mike McDaniel remaining the only offensive mind in the AFC East?
I mean, normally I'd probably be pretty excited. If you asked me this last season at the end of that year, I'd be like, okay, yeah, Mike McDaniel, this offense, we're a high-octane machine. No one can stop us. But after what we saw this year, I'm a little bit, maybe not so confident as I might have been. So I do not like the Mike Vrabel signing because, let's be honest, a lot of Dolphin fans thought, oh, you bring him in here, he's that guy that can get this team over the hump. He can be that authority figure that's going to just come right in, plug and play, and get us to the playoffs. Now he's in New England. Aaron Glenn, I know everybody wants to joke about him and the fake spike, but that's another good signing. So I'm interested to see if Mike McDaniel can adapt, but I think that's just the story of Mike McDaniel, right? Can he adapt? Can he get this offense back on track after, two of those great seasons and then what we saw last year? So long-winded way of saying, hopelessly optimistic. Jake, what about you? What were your thoughts on that? And what did you think when Ben Johnson finally made it official in Chicago? Because we were saying, dude, come on, don't go after defense. Get Ben Johnson in there for Caleb Williams and make that Chicago Bears team great again.
That is such a great point, man. And it's so important to kind of follow along with all this and really understand that everybody's trying to get something out of all these interview processes too. And it just kind of seems like when you say it out loud, like the idea of a defensive coordinator in Chicago, I mean, it's not 1985, you don't have Mike Ditka running around or anything like that. I know he was a tight end, but that you understand what I mean. It's not the Bears anymore where you have this steel curtain defense. I thought it was funny that Ben Johnson called the Chicago Bears a sleeping giant. And I also thought it was pretty funny, Josh. Did you see a lot of people were calling him Adam Gase?
I have seen that, and I don't even know what to say to that. And it's just kind of funny. If we go back to the what ifs, man, wasn't Ben Johnson part of the Dolphins coaching staff at one point? I think there's a bunch of names, a couple back 5 years ago, Adam Gase, I think it might have been his tenure. A lot of those coaches went on to do some stuff. So I don't think it's Adam Gase, but I mean, we didn't think Adam Gase was Adam Gase. Everyone loved him. He was that high guy, the guy that everyone wanted to bring in, the head coach, the young Shula, and that didn't work out. So I think Ben Johnson's a little bit better than Adam Gase. We shouldn't see him on the sideline, doodling him by himself, right? We shouldn't see that.
God, I hope not. I mean, Mike McDaniel gets pretty close, just hitting his vape pen. What would you rather your offensive mind do, Josh? Would you rather them just doodling their plays or hit a vape pen before calling the play?
The vape pen, but I mean, you got to get that play out, man. His just brain just started melting there, and he just could not get those plays in. And we were getting all those delay games, and so I don't know. That could go either way.
And that's kind of where I'm curious to see how this develops, because think about it. Mike McDaniel did a great job against defensive-minded head coaches, except the Bills. We're going to throw the Bills out the window. We understand that they're the big brother. They're hot. We're ugly. They're smart. We're dumb. The whole Adam Sandler skit, you can do it for the Bills. But you think about, Tua's record against New England. I think he's undefeated. And up until that dreaded final game of the season where the Jets beat the Dolphins, there was a situation where Miami was locked in as like the number 2 team in the division. And I'm not saying that as like a big, like, let's celebrate, we're such a good team, but more of just like, we knew that these guys, we could kind of hold out our arm and block them away. But all of a sudden, man, Tua being 10-0 against the New England Patriots, and then in parentheses, 0-2 against Vrabel by being like outscored 80-40, dude, that is absolutely horrifying to me. And if you want to be Tua, and if you want to be show me the money, you go eat your chips. You're undefeated against New England. Keep it that way. And Josh, how do you feel about that? Do you think that is such a unique balance of like, you have one side where Tua was like, he has them figured out to a T, like he is the older brother, but then you just have like stepdad walking in there or something to completely change it up.
Yeah, it's a little bit terrifying. And again, I think Dolphin fans will kind of downplay it, but a lot of us, we remember everyone was saying, get this guy in Miami, it'll turn things around. So I don't think that 10-0 record or whatever it was, his undefeated streak, we can throw that out the window, because all that matters is what he can do against a Vrabel team and what he can do against, Aaron Glenn's defense. So interested to see how this whole thing works out. And hopefully, we're sitting here and Mike McDaniel, is the one shoving them in the locker room. So I think it was Lane posting on Blue Sky. It was like Mike McDaniel when he sees Mike Vrabel, and he just like put himself in a locker or something. And that's pretty much what it is, right? He's like, just going to get out the way.
Speaking of the lockers, I'm just going to go ahead and pull someone out of it. We have Dustin Godin joining us 5 minutes into the show. What's going on, man? Good to see you.
Yeah, how you guys doing? Just sorry for the late arrival, and good to see your guys' faces here in the off season.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And I'm sorry we're putting you on the spot here, but we're very excited to have you. We just kind of wanted to get a little warmed up here before we get into what we called mock draft season. So, Dustin, what are your thoughts here with, as I was talking to Josh, the carousel is starting to slow down in terms of coaching real quick. And you look at the landscape of the AFC East. How do you feel about it when you have Mike McDaniel remaining? Because this isn't something that's changed, but he is still just the only quote unquote offensive guru in the AFC East.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I think, if you just look at the trend of the NFL in general, we've been going down a more defensive minded kind of pattern, right? Like the defenses have been a couple, 3-4 years ago. What was it? Not that uncommon for the top guys at the top of the league, quarterback wise, to have like a 4-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. That's come way down. So the defense is coming back strong. And I think teams have realized that they're either ahead of the 8 ball or behind the 8 ball.
And when you talk about turnovers, I think I don't want to go too far down this path here, but I think I look at the Buffalo Bills as that perfect example where Josh Allen was just known as the guy who the ball's always going to be in his hands and you're going to get him to turn the ball over. But the stretch they've been on has been unreal, where that's why they're playing in the AFC Championship game this weekend. It's because they are playing clean football. They do not turn the ball over, where, I think if you think back to some of Miami's biggest losses, I just instantly go to the Kansas City game in Germany, the fumble right before halftime by Tyreek Hill. Not to call him out specifically, but I mean, that just changed everything. The momentum, it switched everything. Where do you feel this, or how do you feel this is going to impact the Miami Dolphins, where you have these defensive minds that have a nose for the football, and you had Tua come back, have some snapping issues. We know Miami hasn't always been the cleanest team in terms of turning the ball over. Is this going to be that final push that really breaks this Dolphins offense, or do you trust that Mike McDaniel might be able to figure some things out and kind of clean up the operation?
My general feeling is that we've seen the impact already, and we've made mid-season adjustments to it in 2024. There's still more adjustments that need to happen. And I would feel pretty confident that, going into free agency, going into the draft, that we'll make some of those adjustments. But if there was one light that I can see in 2024 is that McDaniel did show, it took him a little bit, but he did show that he can adjust his scheme mid-season, because that was always the issue, right? Like going back to, I don't know, Joe Philbin, every single season we would come out strong, and then we would just boom. And the big reason was because we couldn't self-scout in real time. So to me, it was a good sign to see that this coaching staff could.
Yeah, I agree with you. I want to know, do you have any concerns with, maybe him, maybe not being that alpha compared to a Mike Vrabel? I mean, those teams, those guys, Jake mentioned it, the turnovers, things like that, they're going to go out there. They're going to be, biting kneecaps, Dan Campbell style, right? Mike McDaniel's teams, let's be honest, man, they're much softer than, some of these other teams. How do you think that's going to shape up? Because that, to me, might be my biggest thing. Maybe not so. Has Mike McDaniel learned from that, right? We've heard this at the end of the year, the players all getting on the same page. Are they going to come out and be dogs? Or are they just going to go back to being that soft style of play that we've become accustomed to? Because I don't think that's going to hold up now in the AFC East.
Yeah, so I mean, part of that does come to roster construction, just on the types of physical people you have on your team. But I mean, part of it is on McDaniel, and I generally am not one of those guys that likes to be like, oh, I need my head coach to be a player's coach, or I need him to be, a hard ass or whatever. But I do think McDaniel has probably left it a little too open to guys like Tyreek being a leader, when I don't know for sure he's a leader as much as he is loud.
Those things in today's society get very, very much mixed up. I'm not going to say anything else outside of that, but we do live in a time where I want to say the truth doesn't always sell, but that's not necessarily what I'm getting at. We have everybody making mock drafts. We have everybody saying, I know how to fix the Dolphins. I know what they're supposed to do. I know how we're going to put this team on the right track. So as we have everybody putting in their 2 cents, we're going to put a quarter in the machine. We're going to climb right over the mock drafts. And I wanted us to kind of come together, unite the brain trust, and talk about some positions where if we see this position being drafted in the first round of a mock draft, we can just dump it out the window. There are going to be so many mock drafts. I wanted to kind of solidify some things here where we're like, all right, yes, the Dolphins need to improve at safety, at defensive tackle, at quarterback, wide receiver. The list goes on and on, but all those things can't be addressed in the first round. There are positives and negatives to each of those. Guys, anyone feeling feisty? Anyone want to get started? Otherwise, I can jump in.
Go for it.
All right. So when you look at defensive tackle, there is a real need for the Miami Dolphins to draft a defensive tackle. They haven't replaced the $100 million man in Christian Wilkins. Calais Campbell, he did a great job. He was 37 years old. If he comes back next year, which I think we all agree we want him to, he'll be 38 years old. That is crazy to say out loud and say that we're going to expect him to be a great player all season. I'm not going to doubt him, but I'm just saying when you're talking about constructing a roster and building it up, that's not really a strong foundation for years to come, but it would be one of the strongest pillars for 2025. On top of that, Benito Jones, free agent. Deshaun Hand, another free agent. You have Zach Sealer coming off back-to-back seasons with 10 sacks. You know what he is capable of, and you know the devastation of Christian Wilkins and Zach Sealer, two premier guys who are playing over 90% of snaps. Now, I laid the case that why the Dolphins should draft a tackle, but the reason they shouldn't, or at least my main point why they shouldn't, is pretty simple. We saw the ceiling with Christian Wilkins and Zach Sealer, and we still haven't won a playoff game. I don't know if that's a fair way to justify like the limits here, but for some reason, as I've kind of started doing this exercise, just looking at the ceiling of drafting a defensive tackle, not only in year 1, but year 2, year 3, I just don't know if that first round value is there. I know it's not necessarily fair to say Christian Wilkins doesn't equal a playoff win, but I just wonder if when you're the Dolphins and you have so many weaknesses, just adding someone, a stout, consistent, maybe plays 80% of snaps, defensive tackle, does that really move the needle when you can kind of make it work with Benito Jones and Deshaun Hand and maybe you draft someone later? I think it was Daniel Jeremiah saying this is an absolutely loaded drafted defensive tackle where you just wonder, are we really getting all the juice out of this lemon?
Yeah, you make a great point, Jake. I mean, then when you look at the roster, I mean, they absolutely could use a defensive tackle there. And you can go into every position here, and there could be that anomaly. I mean, I'm looking at Mason Graham in the drafts. That was a player I really like. But there's no way he's going to fall to the Dolphins at 13. That would be that one player that can, go above the rule. But for me, I mean, I think I agree with you. I don't know that it necessarily moves the needle. I think, like you mentioned, Daniel Jeremiah saying this class is absolutely stacked. That's another reason you wouldn't go there in the first round. So it would definitely be an underwhelming pick. I look back at the Christian Wilkins when they drafted him, and I know that he grew on us, right? But at the time, I was like, whatever. So I necessarily, for me, I would like this decision to be made. Calais Campbell says he's coming back. You have him and Zach Sealer. Then you can just wait. That's that depth piece. But yeah, man, I'm out on defensive tackle unless, of course, a Mason Graham or another anomaly would fall. What about you, Dustin? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm 100% with you, Josh. As Jake, you were framing the question, my brain is immediately going to, well, the guy that we have like no chance of getting, Mason Graham, I would run to the podium for that guy. But realistically, where we're at, I'm not picking Kenneth Grant at 13. I would be very especially because I'm factoring in things like by the time we get to the draft, Greer has a tendency to at least put Band-Aids on every position across the board. So I'm assuming we're going into the draft with some kind of plan already. We bring in another defensive tackle and maybe we get Campbell back. So, all that considered, I'm not drafting Kenneth Grant or Harmon in the first round. As Dolphins GM Dustin, I wouldn't do it.
Defensive tackles drafted with top 15 picks since 2015. I might have missed someone here since I've done, it was 10 years and I really tried to do just defensive tackles. And I think we could argue that Christian Wilkins was even a little more than a defensive tackle just because of his pass rush ability and maybe like a 3-4 as an edge. I think he would have been just fine there as you could kind of see his ability to pressure the quarterback. But I mean, just listening to these names, I mean, Danny Shelton, Cleveland Browns in 2015, he went 12th. Sheldon Rankins, 2016, New Orleans, he went 12th. Christian Wilkins, 13th. What I think is interesting is that Dolphins fans and Bills fans, we never really kept track of who was winning between Ed Oliver and Christian Wilkins, but those guys went back to back in the draft. So I always thought that was kind of cool, and we never really linked those together. But then Javon Kinlaw with the San Francisco 49ers in 2020. And then as recent as last year, you had Jalen Carter going to the Eagles. And I mean, I hear the ghosts yelling at their speakers saying, I mean, Ed Oliver, he's a stud, and the Bills are in the AFC Championship. Jalen Carter is an absolute stud, and they're in the NFC Championship. However, the roster construction of both of those defenses were very, very different, I'd argue, when they drafted these players. I mean, I know the Buffalo Bills had an absolute stout secondary. The Eagles, not only do they have a stout offensive or defensive line, but they just do such a great job of just talent year after year after year on that unit. So you could point to guys like Ed Oliver and Jalen Carter being, hey, they made the playoffs and they're winning playoff games. But I'd argue Miami's defense has way too many holes where a defensive tackle can be that, piece.
Yeah, and kind of just to add a little bit more clarity, because I mean, there were some big names you threw out there. I'm not in general against drafting a defensive tackle in the first round, just specifically this year. Mm-hmm. There are too many holes on the team in general that I think are more important, would be the better answer. And yeah, maybe in 2026 draft, we get a defensive tackle in the first round. I don't know. But the guys that would be available at 13, I wouldn't pick. And while I would actually probably want to trade down anyway, as a strategy to maybe, pick up a guard or guard tackle, defensive tackle just seems like not the number one need in this draft.
The inability to just pressure the quarterback, I think, was 100% Miami's biggest weakness last year. But I'd argue that would even just cover up so many holes if you're pressuring the quarterback a little more than they were. But with Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb both projected to come back, that biggest weakness, I think, is going to look a little different when you have that insane influx of talent. You could debate, is Bradley Chubb going to come back? We're not entirely sure. But as of right now, I think just adding them to the equation does so much to that weakness in the trenches, where that also helps take defensive tackle off the board. A lot of talking. Josh, who'd you pick?
Yeah, well, hopefully I'm not stepping on Dustin's toes, because he kind of, I don't want to lay the groundwork out for me. But for me, I'm not going to say I would hate it. I just would not. I'd rather use that pick on other places than a safety. I don't know if it's because I've just watched Malachi Starks recently, and I started with Ole Miss and Alabama, and I'm wondering there was a lot to be desired. And I go back and look at his Pro Football Focus. I picked his 2 worst games, so I don't know if that's just embedded in my head or what. But he didn't really bring off that that elite difference maker that I may have seen from Minkah Fitzpatrick way back in the day, or Kyle Hamilton. I don't know. He just doesn't feel like a can't miss type prospect. But some people might argue there, and with the Dolphins' need at safety, I mean, I could absolutely see them making this pick if he lands there. But for me, I just feel like there's so many other areas in which they could go. And honestly, I don't know that safety is really the best value there. If you look at the draft class, there's a ton of great prospects that'll be available. Again, I don't want to just touch on prospects, but we have plenty of time to do that before the draft. But there are some safeties out there: Xavier Watts, Kevin Winston Jr., Andrew Makoba. There's a bunch of guys that, could come in and fill that role that the Dolphins could need. My biggest fear is, what are they going to do in free agency? Because you cannot go into next season with just Patrick McMorris, which I looked at their roster and it looks like he might be the only guy under contract, unless maybe Jalen Ramsey. We've heard them. Maybe he moves to safety eventually later in his career, whatever it might be. Dolphins absolutely need 1, 2, maybe even 3 safeties, but I just feel like there's better value there. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dustin. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jake.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly kind of don't think we will have to actually entertain this. I think Starks has a very real possibility of going to the Saints at 9. But if he's there, I would say he's probably the safest pick that Greer could make as far as like floor and like opinion about him goes. It's kind of that like conservative pick, right? Like he's not like. And I did the same exact thing you talked about there, Josh. A couple of weeks back, I put into my family group chat. I was like, I just don't see it with Starks. Well, I had happened to watch the same exact 2 games that you mentioned there. And then I went back and I watched some of the other games. And I was like, okay, I see it. I think he's going to be good. But yeah, no, I'm with you. I don't think, it depends on who else is there. Everything's relative. Like, as much as I'm not really, I don't really believe that like Tyler Warren is going to be like a generational tight end. I think he's going to be a good tight end, just maybe not generational. And so I wouldn't, like knee-jerk reaction, I wouldn't want to pick him at 13. But like if it's between him and Starks, and Kelvin Banks is gone, Will Campbell's gone, like, it's all relative, and nobody wants to trade up for, a non-quarterback. It's all relative.
The first safety picked in the 2024 draft, I just looked this up real quick, so sorry if it's wrong. I believe it was Brian Branch by the Detroit Lions, and he went 45th overall, the first safety off the board. Now, I know talent, like it changes every year and how the styles of defenses work, but I think that's something everyone should really consider. And also consider that Justin Simmons, one of the premier safeties on the free agent market, made absolutely nothing. So you have to kind of question, like, hey, what's the value in this position in terms of the overall construction of the roster? Of course, like even running back, like you have scenarios where you get Saquon Barkley or Jahmyr Gibbs and it works. But a lot of the time you're kind of sitting there like, do we really need a running back this high in the draft? And I kind of feel the same way about safety in this scenario where, Dustin, you scare me a bunch here saying that it's a safe pick, because it screams what Chris Grier would want to do in this scenario. It screams it. It's such a hard scenario, and it's unfair for us as Dolphin fans that we have to acknowledge that Chris Grier is general managing for his life, and Mike McDaniel is coaching for his life. And in order to do that, in order to keep your job, you're going to have to be focused a little more on this year in terms of just the franchise getting better year after year. So that to me tells me, man, that safety is very much in play, but I don't even think I want to see it. I mean, hell, the Dolphins had one of the best safeties in the league in Minkah Fitzpatrick, and it seemed like they kind of nailed it perfectly. They were able to trade him, get a first back, second round pick. All of a sudden you get Javon Holland back there. So I do think there are some different ways to fill this need. And I think that conversation might start with, we don't have any safeties on the roster. What sounds better to you guys? Not having any safeties on the roster, or having one starting cornerback in Kendall Fuller and one starting safety in Jalen Ramsey? I think that's a legitimate conversation that will be had this offseason.
Yeah. And I would throw in another, wrinkle there in that, I know Holland had his big old lumps that he took this season. But there's an upside to that, in that his contract could be cheaper. And so, does he take a smaller contract on a prove it deal and get motivated and stop making business decisions on some of those tackles?
No,
I don't think so, man.
That does not sound like him.
Those quotes that both him and Grier had, it sounded like they were done. And Javon hasn't necessarily, from seeing videos of kicking rocks and other things, I don't necessarily think that that'd be a situation or a conversation he'd want to have. Personally, I don't know. So that could definitely work out. And Dustin, to that point though, like the safety market is diminished. Like you're going to be able to flex. Right. Deshaun Elliott, 2 years, $6 million from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like when you're talking about guys who never should have left Miami, I mean, you probably could have signed Brandon Jones in the middle of last year for half of what he got from Denver. I mean, those are things that the Dolphins failed to consider too. So, dude, I love bringing up safety in this conversation, because I do like Malachi Starks, but just saying that this is too safe of a pick, I think that's just so perfect, and that's probably why it's going to happen. That's such a great way to put it.
To me, if I had to bet, and someone told me that, he's going to make it past the Saints, I would probably bet that that's who we pick, just, with Grier's history. But
had the Saints.
Sorry, Jake. I was just gonna say I'd written down 7 safeties drafted in the first round since 2010, I guess. So last one would have been Kyle Hamilton, I believe 2022. I think I had written down. Sorry about that.
Can you peek at when he was drafted? What exact position? If that's possible. I just don't know about safety. I just don't know if it's
14 he was drafted.
Okay.
Before that, it would have been Jamal Adams, or Minkah was 11 in 2018. Jamal Adams 6th in 2017, and then Eric Berry was 5th in 2010.
Eric Berry was a stud, though. If you can get Eric Berry, that changes things. But I don't.
We just need a Minkah. We just need a Minkah. Like.
That just was a whole other thing too. Like, have you seen what's happening with him? Like, there are issues with him in Pittsburgh now. It kind of feels like some unnamed names type of things. So yeah, final, just to kind of consensus here. Do we all agree that 2 positions we do not want to see the Dolphins draft in the first round: defensive tackle and safety?
relatively.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Like Dustin now talked me into it. Safe pick. He's a cat from Georgia. Standout. I mean, it just seems like it's going to be the Chris Greer pick, and now I'm sitting here saying we don't want him. I prematurely maybe. Yeah,
I
we can
We're
mean,
agree,
Dolphin
Jake.
fans.
Yeah,
I
they're
mean,
going to do exactly what we don't want.
right.
Running back.
And to me, if you're Greer and you're stuck in a situation where, again, Banks and Campbell are off the board, Mason Graham is off the board because he's probably a top 5 pick. And you don't have anybody that wants to move up for maybe. Oh, and what if Ashton Genty goes to like the Cowboys at 12, right? Like, what happened? What do you do there? And no one wants to trade up for Tyler Warren at that point. Like,
Need Jalen Milroe to drop.
I don't know if he's gonna be a first round guy.
I just saw him mocked in like the 9th or something like that, and I was like, "Come on, man,
Maybe.
Too soon for that. Too soon."
But yeah, I guess like I wouldn't be I will admit, last draft when we picked Chop, I was distraught. I was like, I really wanted what was that guard's name?
Barton, or was it someone
Yeah,
else?
Graham Barton. Yeah, me and my cousin, we both really were like banging the table hard at the draft party.
That's why we didn't get him. Thanks.
You're probably right. But yeah, so and then we picked Chop and we're like, no. And kind of, that kind of leads into my pick for what I don't want to draft is the edge. I do not want to draft an edge in the first round this year.
I was actually going to ask you guys, my bad about that. Even though Chris Greer, after he fell for the Chris Harris spin move trap, he's been pretty good at identifying good defensive ends.
Even Kamara, like he didn't get a lot of play, and even when he was on the play, he probably didn't, get the volume stats that you would hope. But as a rookie that you pick in, what was it? Was he 3rd or 4th round?
Kamara?
Yeah.
5th round.
He was 5th round. All right. So like relative to that, I thought he played above expectation. So yeah, I don't have a problem with Greer's ability to find talent at edge. I just think it would absolutely be a luxury pick and a half, like doing that.
Would Bradley Chubb change any of that? I mean, we're looking at it, right? You got Chop Robinson, Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips should be good to go. I mean, then you got Kamara, you got some of those other pieces. I mean, you have to love what they're doing there at edge. But I mean, say they do get rid of Bradley Chubb, which I think Jake and I were in a thread, and I think we both agree that we don't want to see that. You go out there, max out your talent if you can, and make it work. But what if the Dolphins do find a way to, I don't know, whatever it is with Bradley Chubb, would that then open up would you then maybe reconsider edge, or would you still feel pretty good with Jalen Phillips and Chop Robinson? Because for me, even if Abdul Carter, he'd probably be the only one that if he fell, I'd run to the table. But that dude's what, top 3 pick, if that. I mean, that's never going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I am coming from. I kind of expect the Dolphins to restructure Chubb this year, and kind of extend out some of that cap hit that he's going to be, and so I don't really expect him to, and I think that's part that plays into why we continued to shut him down at the end of the season last year. So yeah, I am coming from the frame of mind that Chubb and Phillips at some point next year, and as well as Chop will be our starting rotation of edge rushers. If Chop is complete, if Chubb is completely gone, then yeah, I probably consider it more maybe Mikael Williams. I have to watch him a little bit more still. I've been neglecting edge in the first round because I just don't want one.
I don't want to get swept up with just a name, because I think we as fans do this quite a bit. I mean, even Kamara, everyone was like, yeah, year 1, he's going to be a guy. But I mean, even someone I'm super excited to see through our training camp, Grayson Murphy, he missed the entire season. He was an undrafted rookie at a UCLA. I think his brother got drafted somewhere out west, but he was just known for as kind of like Chop, a pressure guy. Somebody, once he gets a little stronger, he can really start connecting. So, I mean, I'd be willing to go into next year if you have Chubb, Phillips, Chop, and Grayson Murphy. But I'd also say too, there are some injury concerns there. Something I do think is funny is that when people are talking about the depth chart, they are so ready to, they forget how good Bradley Chubb is when he is healthy. And they're like, yeah, man, we got young up and coming Quentin Bell, who's posting about how he just finished his 7th season in the NFL. 6th, I think. 6th. So there is,
I do like Bell though, by the way.
Yeah. I think he's like Emmanuel Ogbah light. in a sense, where I think not maybe even in the skill set, just like somebody who's going to be decent, maybe not game breaking plays every week, but somebody who's going to be technically sound on the edge, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like he's a restricted free agent, and then Kramer Good's an exclusive restricted free agent this offseason. We do lose Emmanuel Agba, Tyrell Dodson. We got to sign him. Emmanuel Agba, though, that is the name that's off this list on here. So I don't know, man. There's some pieces there.
So as we look at this defense, are you drafting any defender in the first round? We just laid out 3 positions there. We're like, nah, I think we're good. And I think that the defense isn't what needs the most of a makeover. But I do wonder.
Is Travis Hunter available?
I don't think so.
And some of these mock drafts people send us, they sure are. Like, everyone always posts mock drafts, and it's like the craziest shit always happens. And they're like, look, I got Travis Hunter at 13. It's like,
yeah,
you just ruined your whole mock draft, bro. Yeah, that's a good question, Jake. I guess we don't want defense, right? Unless one of these, like a corner, you said Travis Hunter or Will Johnson's banged up, right? So yeah, I guess we're out on defense as a whole. It seems. Don't send us your mock drafts with defense, basically, is what we're saying. Don't do it.
Well, here's the thing. Like, I can't view the first round and grade it on its own. Like, if we take a defender in the first round and then we get like Donovan Jackson. Got you. Josh, so what do you think of those Chris Greer comments? Do you take that as word that he's going to really, throw a couple of these high up picks at the offensive line?
I think so. I think he's realizing that we're just going to keep posting that video of him until he eventually goes after offensive line. So, again, it's easy to say now, but we'll see what he does with his Band-Aids, with some of these guards. I mean, even safety, I'm looking at, I'm not even going to pronounce his name, but San Francisco has safety that's coming out. I mean, there's going to be pieces where they can plug and maybe bring in some guys that, they're completely ignoring these things. But you have to invest in the offensive line. We need guards. We need depth all throughout. So I am going to take him for his word for it that he's going to fix this offensive line. And Tua Tagovailoa is never, ever, ever going to get hurt again. And that's just how it's going to be.
Beautiful, Josh. Absolutely beautiful. So
yeah,
just, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to kind of piggyback off that. Yeah, I totally expect that Greer will bring in 1 or 2 free agents, probably one more expensive than the other. And with the idea that one of them will be challenging whoever we draft for the starting spot kind of deal. And so me personally, I would double dip. I know McDaniels in his scheme, doesn't prioritize guards as much as they do athletic tackles, but I am quite tired of seeing Tua have to roll out. So yeah, I would double dip at guard and maybe both situations, like 2 guys in the draft, maybe a first or second round and a 4th or 5th rounder at guard. But because we also need a swing tackle too. That's the other thing. So we need like a guard tackle hybrid, and we need like a true guard in the draft. It would be my hope.
So I know Miami just hates to draft guards, absolutely hates them. I mean, they nailed Robert Hunt, but I even think when he was coming out, he was even kind of a tweener where didn't he start at right tackle, and it kind of took a little bit for him to settle at right guard too. So, I mean, he was even as a 2nd round pick. So that will be interesting there as well. Oh man, I'm sorry, Dustin. I just had a question for you. Josh, did you have any thoughts? My bad. I lost it.
No.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
You're talking, my bad, Josh. So we're talking about kind of the willingness or the need for Tua to roll out. Does drafting an inline tackle maybe in the first round start to change things? Somebody who maybe could do some of the things you'll see from a swing tackle, maybe some of the things you'll see from that inline blocker. And if you're lucky, 3 years down the road, he turns into maybe a relatively okay receiving threat. Is that a possibility?
I assume this is going in the direction of tight end. You're talking about like a true Y, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, totally. There's a lot of guys in this draft. Tight end has been one of the areas that I've kind of focused on so far. And sure, Warren would absolutely fit that role, although he might be a more immediate day one offensive weapon, option than some of the other guys. But I would be perfectly happy getting like a Luke Lachey, in the later rounds, or Gunnar Helm even. Either of those 2 guys, I would be happy with, kind of being our, slotting them in there at that multi-role tight end, at least of the future. Maybe some of them are more inline blocker, to start. But yeah.
Is that a true needle mover, do you think, Josh? Like blocking, yeah.
I mean, it doesn't sound sexy, but I think it absolutely could help if you don't have, what Julian Hill at times looking lost out there, Durham Smythe. I mean, things like that. If you can have a guy that can block and be an upgrade in that aspect as well as, do some of the pass catching things, I absolutely think it would be a game changer. I think that's why you see Tyler Warren, everybody's hyping him up because, he's that 1A, right? He's that guy that could be available. A lot of people are excited about his, unicorn stuff, lining up in the backfield, lining out, blocking, doing a little bit of everything. But I mean, most tight ends, there should be a lot of tight ends in this class that can do those things like Dustin said. So I absolutely think finding one of them in this class and then, letting them develop and that can absolutely change this offense and help specifically in the run game, which I mean, let's be honest, Dolphins could use every little bit of help in that area.
Yeah. And if you look at, if you look at the snap counts at tight end too, like if you say that maybe Smythe and Hill are kind of more like we use them like our Ys, and you say that Ingold and I know Ingold's not a tight end, but just bear with me for a minute. And you say that Ingold and Jonnu are kind of in the other side of like the weapons side, because really we didn't use Ingold blocking much last year at all. So you look at the snap counts, it's pretty even. If you say like those guys are the Ys and these guys are the more like F type receivers, right? It's pretty even snap counts. So if we can, in Jonnu's performance last year kept the F, position very profitable. If we can just immediately improve that Y, our run game should open right up.
Last time the Dolphins drafted a tight end in the first round, anyone?
Gosh.
It's got to be before our time, right? I hope.
Ironically, it doesn't exist. It never happened. The
Okay.
Dolphins have never drafted a first-round tight end. Last time they drafted a second-round tight end?
That was Gesicki, right?
Yeah.
Or last time, he would have been the last, right?
Third round?
Oh, come on.
Clay?
Smythe?
Nope.
Smythe?
2021. No. He's no longer on the team.
Ignu? No.
Nope.
When was Ignu?
Oh, I forgot about Michael
Ignu was like
Agnew.
2013 too-ish, I think. 2012. Ignu was 2012. He's not on the team. He went to the
Hunter
same
Long.
college.
Hunter Long. There we go.
There it is.
Oh yeah, the
me a
Brian
while.
Flores special.
Fourth round?
Fasano. Smythe. Which
No,
one of them?
it's already been said. We didn't draft Fasano. Get out of here, tough guy.
I'm just throwing out every tight end I can think of at this point. What else we got?
Fourth round, he caught a game-winning touchdown in the back of the end zone against the Atlanta Falcons.
It was Clay, right?
Nope.
Oh no, who was? I was at that game too.
I've heard one of you already say his name.
Smythe?
Nope.
I'm just gonna keep saying Smythe. Let's just look up when he was drafted. Like it's gotta be close.
Smythe was 2018 with Oh wait, so this is wrong. So it is Smythe because this has Deion Sims as the last time the Dolphins drafted a fourth round tight end. But no, Smythe was as well. Damn. This
I knew if I kept saying it, had to be right. I knew Smythe had to be in there somewhere.
Josh, I owe you a huge apology because you nailed it. You nailed it.
Yeah, and Fasano too. I had him as well.
But I think tight end is where I'm starting to settle in as my, like, if we want to talk about a first round pick, I can get excited for just how it fits this offense. And you see the vision, especially like we talked about at the top, you have three different defensive minded head coaches. And I'd argue that all three of them run very different styles of defenses. So the Dolphins are going to need flexibility to be able to play different ways. Dustin, you mentioned it, they started doing it last year. We saw the Dolphins finally integrated tight end. We see, wow. Devon Achane catching 30 passes. It seems like a game. So you're seeing the changes, but how do you maximize that? How do you make it where everyone's on the same page? Any other positions that you guys want to just kind of throw out there, like hang up and listen? We'll see what happens here. No quarterback. No, that's what I'm surprised you guys didn't bring up. If we wanted to talk like a second or third round quarterback, maybe, but definitely not first round. Any other positions?
As like nose?
Hard nose.
Running back, I mean, that I think we already talked about that, but everybody has Ashton Genty going to the Dolphins in some of their mocks. I couldn't see that. I'd be okay with receiver depending on how the room falls, but nose, I think we touched on most of them. I think I could spin any of them though. I spin Charles Harris. I can spin any draft pick. We can Luke Falk. I did a cut up of him. I mean, we can spin whoever, man.
I mean, that's the way it goes, right? Like as Dolphins fans, night one, we're like, instant knee-jerk reaction is, dang. And then you start watching this stuff and you're like, all right, I can see the blueprint. And then, halfway through the season, we're like ready to cut him again. And then 2 years later, when he's actually good, we're like, I never doubted him.
I do the old Speaking to that, are you really on board for like a first round wide receiver? In this scenario, I think that involves Tyreek Hill no longer being on the team. But I also just want to throw out there, I mean, Malik Washington, 6th round pick, he came in and looked like, I wouldn't say necessarily a stud, but he looked like he belonged in the NFL. He looked like a dog. He looked like a fighter, where I wouldn't hate giving him a percentage of the targets throughout the year too, as just another receiving option. Is the value really there in the first round? Do you guys feel?
Tet. He won't be there, but Tet.
Yeah, McMillian, that was the one that we talked about, Jake. You mentioned how we could maybe trade up using Tyreek Hill, and I was like, I mean, if they wanted to go up and get a receiver, that would be him. But I think Pro Football Focus has him as like their number 1 prospect. So there are some very good receivers, and that could be a way the Dolphins go. I mean, that could absolutely change with the Tyreek Hill trade, which if you look around, I mean, there's some little breadcrumbs suggesting he could be gone. So that would absolutely open up wide receiver there. And then, that's everything's on the table. I'd love to see him move up though from Tet. That'd be crazy, man.
I mean, could you imagine if we actually traded him to the Patriots though?
That is the rumor going around. Yes, sending him
to
the response I saw that just made the most sense. Someone just replied to that saying he's not Devontae Parker, and that kind of pretty much, I think, sealed the deal of like, I don't think he's going to go to New England. And I mean, if you're Vrabel, you really think like, or if you're Vrabel, are you under the impression of like AJ Brown was chill here, so I mean, I can handle Tyreek Hill? Is that something he'd ever think? I don't know if they'd even be like the same type of diva receiver.
I hate even listening to your division rival. I always felt that was just stupid. Like, hang that phone up, man. You ain't trying to make them better. I don't give what pick they're giving you, man.
Yeah, they got to pay the extra tax, like an extra first.
Yes. Dustin, do you think he's gone this offseason?
Well, I will admit that I'm kind of biased in this because last offseason I said we shouldn't have extended him and that we should have moved off. We should move off him after this last season, solely from a money standpoint because we paid Waddle. Now, with the locker room stuff, like I kind of just don't think it's a good idea to bring him back and encourage that behavior kind of thing. And again, I think he's more loud than he is a leader. What was the linebacker that just came out and said that Tyreek Hill's a guy that needs his coach to be on him like all the time?
It was a former Patriots coach too, I think.
Ninkovich, right?
Yes, I think that's who it was because he has a podcast.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm if I can make it happen and not do it in a way, because there's some cap questions there, like, do you do it after June 1st, so we save money, and does him taking himself out of the game eliminate some of his guarantees if we want to play hardball? Like, there's a lot of moving parts there, but if I could make it happen, I would do it in an instant.
Yeah, throw up the deuces. It's over, man. It's Jover.
It just seems like if he's on the team week 1, it just feels like there's no other outcome other than like week 6 when Miami's 2-4 and him just, sitting there wearing Patriot Pat on his shoes like Jimmy Butler is right now for the Heat, and just making everyone uncomfortable, a huge scene. And I love what you said about being loud over a leader. It was one of the cold games late in the year where the Dolphins were down a bit. I don't know if they had Tua or not, but I just remember Tyreek just getting up on the sideline, just like clapping, just aimlessly, like running up and down the sideline, clapping, where that was like his impression of like what I'm supposed to be doing as a leader. But it's kind of speaks to the idea of, no, man, you're just kind of being loud. You're not really gearing people up. So I'm with that. I don't see any good scenario of him staying in Miami. It just doesn't make sense.
And not only that, but I feel like we need, and like with Tyreek on the field, we can't really go out and get what I feel we need at receiver and expect that receiver to get a lot of snaps, right? Like, and I don't think Tyreek is going to be happy, and Waddle won't be happy either. If you're just saying, all right, Tyreek and Waddle, you're going to split your reps and we're going to play a true X over here. Like, I just don't see anybody being happy with that.
Do you both believe or are confident in Jalen Waddle's ability to maybe not be Tyreek Hill, but be that weapon in this offense? Obviously, he did it for multiple years, 3 straight years of 1,000 yards in a row. But I mean, I'd be lying. I mean, I've been in Dynasty. I've always loved Waddle. the injuries over the last couple of years have started to slowly become a little bit of a concern.
He plays through them most of the time, though.
It's true.
It's a little bit of a concern. I feel like this year in particular, Waddle has regressed, I think. And I think part of that is being, last year with his mental approach to the season of like, yeah, the whole team is like hammering on this Tyreek 2K stuff. Like, I got to kind of step aside and kind of let that happen. Like, I think that was detrimental to his growth as a player. So I think also this is more gut feeling than anything, but I feel like he's been not super happy with his targets as well. So I think, we bring in someone younger, someone that's big, but you put a pretty big emphasis on designs for Waddle. And you answer that question while he's on this contract, because sure, it's a decently long contract, but there's outs if you need them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you, Jake. I think the injuries from time to time, really have me questioning whether he can take on even more of a load. But I have no, I'm not worried about him when he's out there, right? I think he can. We kind of joked when they first came, it was the Spider-Man meme, him and Tyreek Hill, right? I mean, I absolutely think Jalen Waddle could fit in there, but I do think if you move on from Tyreek and you have Jalen Waddle fill in that role, like Dustin said, then you get that a bigger body on the outside. You maybe get another tight end and things like that, and you build this offense differently. I think I said in the previous pod, like then you build a real offense, right? Not this gimmicky type thing that we become accustomed to. So yeah, I think Jalen Waddle can do it. Would be a little bit hesitant whether or not his body can withstand that full, 100 plus 120. But we saw it his rookie year, so I don't know what I'm talking about.
And that's kind of what I've been reminding myself throughout this playoff run. It's not teams that can do something really well. It's teams that can do just about anything pretty okayly. Like, you just need to be able to diversify your assets. When you just are trying to win on speed after speed, you just see how it fails. And you just see how a team like the Chiefs or like the Bills without that true elite star wide receiver can, continue to move the ball down the field, play clean football and different things like that. But guys, this was a lot of fun. I feel like I learned a lot. I didn't mention a single draft prospect, so I appreciate you both informing me. As we start digging into mock draft season, it's only going to get crazier from here. So you heard it first here. You heard it from us. Defensive tackle out the window. Defensive end out the window. Unless Chubb's out the window too, then maybe a defensive end. And finally, please, Chris Greer, do not play it safe and draft a safety. But that is it. That is all the time we have today on Another Dolphins podcast. If you're liking what you're listening to, we continue this podcast throughout the off season. Our schedule is a little more inconsistent when we don't have games to build around, but best way to negate that is to make sure you're subscribed. You will know every time a new episode comes out. Thank you all so much for listening. Hope you all have a wonderful weekend. And most importantly, fins up.
Fins up.
Fins up.